The night was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that sent a shiver down Elias Carter's spine. Rex, the Belgian Malinois at his side, stiffened. His ears pricked up, muscles tensing beneath his thick coat. Elias, though blind, could sense it, the change in the air, the shift in his dog's stance. Something was coming. The ranch, nestled deep in the Texan desert near the Mexican border, had always been a sanctuary. After losing his sight in a military mission gone wrong, Elias had retreated to this quiet life, raising cattle and trying to forget the ghosts of war. But tonight, the war had found him again. Then came the sound, faint at first, then undeniable. The low hum of an approaching vehicle. Tires crunching against gravel. Unfamiliar. Uninvited. Rex growled, a deep, guttural sound Elias hadn't heard in years. Elias reached down, running his rough fingers over the dog's head. "Easy, boy," he murmured. The truck rolled to a stop just beyond the fence. Doors open. Footsteps crunched. 4, maybe 5 men. Heavy boots, moving with the confidence of people who thought they owned the world. Then, a voice, smooth, arrogant. "Seeker Carter," the man called out, the hint of a Mexican accent curling around his words. "We have business with you." Elias remained still on his porch, gripping his cane tightly. "I don't do business after dark," he said evenly. I chuckle. "I think you'll make an exception." The next sound was what set Rex off, the sharp clink of a latch being opened. The men had entered his property. Before Elias could react, the front gate burst open, and heavy footsteps stormed toward him. Rex moved. The dog shot forward like a bullet, slamming into the first man before he could pull his weapon. A scream, a thud, then chaos. Chingado. "It's a fucking attack dog. Get the dog. Get it." Shots rang out, the flash of muzzle fire illuminating the night for mere seconds. Elias ducked, heart pounding as he heard the struggle. Rex was trained for this, more than just a guide dog. He was a war veteran, a soldier who had faced terrorists and insurgents. These cartel thugs had no idea what they were dealing with. "Hold him down," someone yelled. A sharp yelp of pain. Elias's heart clenched. No, he moved instinctively, but before he could take another step, something heavy struck the back of his head. The world spun, darkness swallowing him whole. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the sound of tires peeling away, and Rex's desperate growl fading into the distance. Elias woke with a pounding headache, the metallic taste of blood on his tongue. The cold dirt pressed against his cheek as he struggled to push himself upright. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what had happened. Then it hit him. Rex. Panic surged through him like a bolt of electricity. He reached out, feeling the empty space where his loyal companion should have been. The silence of the ranch, usually comforting, now felt suffocating. He forced himself to focus, to breathe through the pain. His military training kicked in, instincts honed from years of combat. The attack hadn't been random. They had come for something specific. Not cattle, not money. They had come for Rex. A deep rage burned in his chest, overpowering the pain. He staggered to his feet, gripping the porch railing to steady himself. He listened, filtering out the night sounds, the wind, the rustling brush, the distant howl of a coyote. Nothing out of the ordinary, but the ground still carried the vibrations of tire tracks heading south, toward the border. His hands clenched into fists. They thought they could take his dog and walk away. They thought he was just a blind old man with no way to fight back. They were wrong. Elias moved quickly, his body running on muscle memory. Inside the house, he grabbed his go bag, a relic from his past life. Inside were the essentials: weapons, ammunition, a satellite phone, and something most people wouldn't expect, a high-tech GPS tracker embedded in Rex's collar. It was a precaution he had installed years ago, a leftover habit from his military days. He activated the tracker, fingers steady despite the fury coursing through his veins. A soft beep confirmed the signal. They hadn't thought to check. A slow smile formed on his lips. Amateurs. The signal placed Rex roughly 20 miles south, moving fast. They were taking him straight into cartel territory. That complicated things. Javier Mendez, the man who ran the Los Sangres cartel, ruled those lands like a king. Corrupt police, paid-off border agents. Elias would have no allies there. Didn't matter. He didn't need allies. He strapped on his gear, adjusting the pistol at his side, then grabbed the shotgun from under his bed. He didn't have time for a perfect plan. He had one objective: get Rex back. Stepping outside, he took one last breath of the cold desert air before climbing into his truck. The old engine roared to life. Elias didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas, sending a cloud of dust into the night as he sped toward the only thing that mattered. Rex was out there, surrounded by men who had no idea what they had just unleashed. And Elias Carter was coming for them. The highway stretched before Elias, an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkened desert. He drove with calculated precision, relying not on sight but on instincts sharpened by years of experience. The subtle vibrations of the tires, the distant hum of the wind, the occasional shift in air pressure, these were his senses now, and they told him everything he needed to know. The tracker on Rex's collar pulsed steadily, leading him deeper into cartel territory. As the miles rolled by, memories surfaced, unbidden yet vivid. Javier Mendez. The name alone sent a rush of anger through Elias. Mendez wasn't just any cartel boss, he was a tactician, a man who operated like a warlord. He didn't just run drugs, he controlled entire networks, bribed politicians, and executed rivals with surgical precision. Elias had crossed paths with men like him before, back in his military days. He knew their kind. They thrived on fear, ruled by violence. But Mendez had made a mistake. He had taken something that didn't belong to him. And Elias intended to remind him why some enemies were best left alone. His truck's engine growled as he approached the outskirts of a small desert town, Santa Muerte. It was the last stop before the border, a place where the law held no power and the cartel's grip was absolute. If Rex had been taken, this was the place to start looking. Elias pulled into an old gas station, rolling to a stop near the pump. He stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel, then tilted his head slightly, listening. The station was mostly deserted except for a single attendant, a weary man with a cigarette dangling from his lips. Elias approached slowly. "Need some directions," he said, his voice calm but firm. The attendant barely glanced at him. "Ain't much out here, old man. Just sand and trouble." Elias smirked. "I'll take both." The man exhaled a stream of smoke. "What are you looking for?" Elias reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded $100 bill, and held it up. "A dog. Belgian Malinois. Military trained. Someone took him from my ranch. I'm guessing they passed through here." The attendant's expression flickered just for a second, but Elias caught it. "You don't want to be asking about that," the man muttered. Elias leaned in slightly. "And you don't want to be on the wrong side of this conversation." A long silence. Then, reluctantly, the man nodded toward a dirt road behind the station. "Saw a couple of SUVs heading that way about an hour ago. Look, cartel. If they got your dog, they're taking him to the compound outside town." Elias slipped the bill into the man's pocket and turned back to his truck. A compound. That was all he needed to hear. He climbed back in, gripped the wheel, and set off once more. The hunt had just begun. Elias followed the dirt road out of town, the truck bouncing over uneven terrain. The tracker on Rex's collar showed he was still moving, but slower now. They had reached their destination. That meant security, armed guards, and no easy way in. He had no backup, no element of surprise. Just an old man and a truck full of memories from a past life he had tried to leave behind. But he didn't need anything else. A mile ahead, the compound emerged from the desert like a fortress. High walls, floodlights, a perimeter lined with razor wire. The Los Sangres cartel wasn't subtle. They didn't need to be. This was their domain. Elias stopped the truck a safe distance away, killed the engine, and listened. The night air was thick with tension, the faint murmur of voices, and the occasional static of radios drifting from the compound. He slid out, moving with the careful silence of a man who had spent years navigating enemy territory. He needed information before making his move. He circled the perimeter, keeping low. The cartel wasn't expecting an attack, but they were always prepared for one. Men with rifles patrolled in pairs, their boots crunching against the gravel. A few stood near the main gate, smoking, laughing, comfortable. That was good. Comfortable men made mistakes. Then, a sound. A bark. Muffled, but unmistakable. Rex. Elias clenched his jaw. He followed the sound, mapping the area in his mind. The dog was being held in a smaller building near the back, likely a storage shed or a kennel. That was his entry point. He waited for a patrol to pass, then moved. Slow. deliberate. His boots barely disturbed the dirt as he slipped past the outer fence, using the shadows as cover. He reached the building in minutes, pressing his back against the rough wooden walls. Inside, he could hear movement. Rex pacing, frustrated. A guard stood near the door, shifting his weight lazily. Elias moved fast, silent as death. An arm around the man's throat, a sharp twist, and the body went limp. No sound, no alarm. He dragged the corpse into the shadows and stepped inside. Rex's ears perked up the moment Elias entered. The dog let out a low whine, muscles tensing, ready for a fight. Then he caught Elias's scent. His stance softened. "Easy, boy," Elias murmured, crouching. His hands found the thick fur, the warmth of his oldest friend. Then the door behind him burst open. Light flooded the room. Alto, rifles raised. Voices shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed the nearest crate and hurled it, sending supplies scattering as he rolled to cover. Bullets tore through the air. Rex snarled, launching forward. The escape had just begun. Elias moved without hesitation, his mind snapping into combat mode. He felt the heat of bullets slicing through the air, heard the crunch of boots storming into the small building. He had no sight, but he didn't need it. Every breath, every vibration, every shift in the air told him exactly where his enemies were. Rex lunged first, his powerful jaws clamping down on the nearest guard's arm. A scream erupted, followed by the crash of a body hitting the floor. Elias capitalized on the chaos, grabbing a metal rod from a broken crate and swinging hard. He felt the impact reverberate up his arms as it connected with another man's skull. A second gunshot exploded to close. Elias ducked, felt the heat pass over his head. Then, silence. The last man standing hesitated. Big mistake. Elias struck, disarming him with a quick, brutal maneuver. The man staggered, choking on his own panic. Elias grabbed him by the collar, yanked him close. "Where's Mendez?" he growled. The thug spat blood, trembling. "He's not here. He's meeting with buyers at the airstrip." Elias tightened his grip. "What buyers?" "Americans. Military. They're moving something big." Elias processed the information in seconds. Mendez wasn't just running drugs. He was trafficking weapons. That changed everything. A sharp bark snapped him back. Rex was at his side, ears flattened, muscles coiled. They needed to move. Elias yanked the guard forward, using him as a human shield as he stepped into the open. Floodlights blazed to life. More shouts. More guns. The entire compound was waking up. Then, an engine roared. A vehicle skidded to a stop near the entrance. "Elias, get in." The voice was sharp, urgent. Sarah Connors. She had come through. Elias didn't hesitate. He shoved the guard aside and sprinted. Rex followed, a blur of motion. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels. Sarah threw the truck door open as Elias leapt inside. Rex jumped in behind him, panting, wild-eyed. Sarah slammed the gas. The truck fishtailed before rocketing forward, tires screeching against the desert floor. Gunfire chased them, but they were already too far, dust swallowing them whole. Elias exhaled, his pulse still hammering. He reached down, his fingers brushing over Rex's fur. The dog leaned into his touch. They were alive. For now. Sarah's voice cut through the night. "We've got a problem, Carter." Elias turned his head slightly. "Yeah." She gripped the wheel tighter. "Mendez is selling next-gen weapons to the highest bidder. And we just pissed off the wrong people." Elias smirked, rolling his shoulders. "Good. Let's finish what they started." The real fight was just beginning. Sarah drove fast, the truck bouncing violently over the rugged terrain. The compound faded into the distance, but the danger was far from over. Elias sat in the passenger seat, his fingers drumming against his knee, his mind already forming a plan. Rex lay in the back, ears alert, eyes scanning the dark road behind them. "You sure you want to do this?" Sarah asked, glancing at him. Elias smirked. "You think I'm just gonna let this slide?" She exhaled sharply. "Mendez isn't just some drug dealer. He's got ex-military contractors, corrupt law enforcement, and now you're telling me he's selling high-tech weapons to God knows who. This is way bigger than just getting your dog back." Elias nodded. "I know. And that's why we stop it." Sarah shook her head. "I've got contacts. We could call for help." Elias chuckled. "And who do we call?" "Exactly. The feds. You think they don't already know? You think Mendez got this far without someone covering for him? Sarah stayed silent. Elias continued, his voice steady. We don't have time for bureaucracy. Mendez is at that airstrip right now, closing a deal that could put weapons in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We hit him tonight. Sarah let out a slow breath. All right, but we need a plan. Elias smirked. Good thing I've got one. He tapped the dashboard, signaling her to pull over. The truck skidded to a stop near a cluster of boulders. Elias opened the glove compartment, retrieving a folded map. He traced his fingers over the surface, visualizing the landscape in his mind. The airstrip is here, he said, pointing. There's a service road leading in, but that'll be crawling with guards. We go in from the east, through the dry riverbed. Less visibility, more cover. Sarah studied the map. And then, Elias's expression darkened. We take out the perimeter, disable the runway, and make sure Mendez doesn't leave. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of taking out for just the two of us. Elias smirked. Who said it's just us? Right on cue. Rex let out a low growl, as if he understood exactly what was coming. Sarah sighed, shaking her head. I can't believe I'm doing this. Elias leaned back, stretching his arms. You always said you wanted to go out with a bang. Sarah muttered under her breath before shifting the truck into gear. Fine. But if we die, I'm haunting you. Elias just grinned. Deal. As the truck roared back to life, the airstrip loomed in the distance, its faint lights flickering like a beacon in the dark. The countdown had begun. Tonight, they weren't running. Tonight, they were going to war. The truck rolled to a stop just outside the dry riverbed, engine humming softly. The air was thick with the scent of dust and oil, the distant hum of generators from the airstrip barely audible over the whisper of the wind. Elias and Sarah moved quickly, unloading their gear. Rex stood beside Elias, ears perked, muscles coiled, ready. He could sense what was coming. Elias knelt, running his fingers over the sand, mapping the terrain in his mind. We stick to the eastern edge. The sand will mask our footsteps. Guards will be focused on the main entrance, not the riverbed. Sarah checked her rifle, then adjusted the scope. And when we get inside, Elias smirked. We shut them down. Hard. No more words were needed. They moved as one, slipping into the shadows. The dry riverbed provided perfect cover, its uneven ground allowing them to stay out of sight. Ahead, floodlights cut through the night, illuminating the airstrip. 3 black SUVs were parked near the hangar, their engines still warm. The deal was happening now. Elias signaled for Sarah to hold position as he listened. Voices carried over the wine Spanish, then English. A transaction. Weapons. Money. Then he heard it. A voice he hadn't heard in years. Move the cargo now. We leave in 10 minutes. Javier Mendez. Elias's jaw tightened. He motioned for Sarah to take position near the fuel depot. Plant charges. If we can't stop the deal, we make sure no one leaves with anything. Sarah nodded, disappearing into the dark. Elias turned to Rex, placing a firm hand on the dog's side. Time to go to work, boy. Rex's body tensed, his training kicking in. Elias moved forward, silent as a ghost. He reached the edge of the hangar and pressed against the cold metal, listening. Mendez was inside, surrounded by at least a dozen men. Heavy boots scraped against concrete, the rhythmic clicking of a rifle being loaded. They were ready for trouble. Good. So was he. Elias slipped a knife from his belt and waited. A guard stepped out, lighting a cigarette. The glow barely flickered before Elias struck. A quick twist, a silent choke, and the body slumped to the ground. Rex moved next, disappearing into the dark. A strangled cry, then silence. Elias exhaled slowly. They were in. Then, static crackled in his earpiece. Sarah's voice, tense. Elias, we've got a problem. The buyers, they're not just military contractors. They're government. This isn't just a cartel deal. This is bigger. Elias's blood ran cold. He had walked into something much more dangerous than he had planned. And now, there was no turning back. Elias tightened his grip on his knife, his mind racing. Government buyers. That changed everything. This wasn't just Mendez selling weapons to mercenaries, this was sanctioned, protected. If they made a move now, they wouldn't just be going up against a cartel. They'd be going up against the very people who were supposed to stop men like Mendez. But that didn't change the mission. If anything, it made it more important. He pressed the earpiece. How many? Sarah's voice was clipped. At least 4. Dressed clean, high-end gear. Ex-military. Maybe active. They're talking logistics shipments, routes. This is a long-term operation. Elias exhaled slowly. Stick to the plan. We blow the fuel depot, take out the runway. No one leaves. A pause. Then Sarah's voice, firm. Understood. Elias moved along the side of the hangar, counting steps, feeling every vibration through the ground. Rex followed, his pose silent against the dirt. A second guard rounded the corner, rifle slung lazily over his shoulder. Elias struck fast, yanking the man into the shadows. A single, precise movement, and the body crumpled. Inside, Mendez's voice rang out. Move faster. We take off in 5 minutes. They were running out of time. Elias reached the back of the hangar, feeling for the panel he knew had to be there. His fingers found the metal latch, cold and rusted. He pressed gently and locked. He pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The air was thick with oil and sweat. The hangar smelled of money and war. In the center, a cargo plane sat idle, its cargo bay open. Crates of weapons, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, experimental tech lined the floor. Mendez stood near the loading ramp, flanked by 2 of the government men. They were calm, composed, not buyers, partners. Elias clenched his jaw. Then Sarah's voice came through the earpiece, low and urgent. Charges set. You've got 2 minutes before this whole place lights up. Elias smirked. Plenty of time. He moved, fast and deadly. The first shot was suppressed, a clean kill. The second was a knife, buried deep before the guard could scream. Rex lunged, taking down a third. The hangar exploded into chaos. Mendez spun, eyes wide. Kill them, gunfire erupted. Elias ducked behind a crate, bullets tearing through wood. He reached for his radio. Sarah, do it. Now. A half-second pause. Then, an explosion ripped through the night. The fuel depot went up in flames, a shockwave blasting through the compound. The plane shuddered as the force hit. Screams. Panic. Fire lit up the sky. Elias rose from cover, weapon steady. Mendez was running, but he wouldn't get far. Rex growled low. The hunt was on. Elias moved with purpose, weaving through the chaos as flames roared behind him. The explosion had done its job. Panic spread through the compound, cartel soldiers scrambling for cover, shouting orders that no one could hear over the crackling inferno. The runway was crippled, the fuel depot gone. No one was flying out of here tonight. But Mendez was still on the move. Elias pressed forward, Rex at his side, the dog's body tense with instinct. Through the smoke, he caught the sound of hurried footsteps, the distinct clatter of boots against concrete. Mendez was running toward the convoy of SUVs parked near the hangar. Not happening. Elias raised his weapon and fired. The windshield of the first SUV shattered, the driver slumping forward as blood splattered across the dashboard. The vehicle veered sideways, blocking the exit. The other cars revved their engines, trying to maneuver around it. Then a new sound, a sharp whirring, mechanical and natural. Elias froze. He knew that sound. Drones. From the far side of the airstrip, 3 compact military drones lifted into the air, their rotors slicing through the smoke. Their sleek, matte black exteriors were unmarked, but Elias didn't need insignias to know where they came from. This wasn't just cartel firepower. This was government tech. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. Elias, we have a problem. No shit, he muttered, ducking as one of the drones swooped low, its onboard turret locking onto him. A burst of gunfire kicked up dirt at his feet as he rolled behind a stack of crates. Where the hell did they get drones? Sarah's voice was tense. Same place they got military weapons. Elias reloaded his rifle, listening to the drones reposition overhead. We just kicked a hornet's nest. Yeah, well, I hope you brought bug spray, because more are coming. Reinforcements inbound, ETA 5 minutes. Elias exhaled sharply. They weren't getting out of this clean. A burst of movement near the SUV Mendez, flanked by 2 armed men, sprinting toward the last working vehicle. Rex, Elias commanded, his voice low. The dog didn't hesitate. He launched forward, a blur of muscle and fury. The nearest guard barely had time to react before Rex's jaws clamped down on his arm, dragging him to the ground. The second man turned his weapon, but Elias was faster. A single shot dropped him where he stood. Mendez, however, didn't stop. He threw himself into the SUV, the engine roaring to life. Elias fired twice, but the armored glass held. The vehicle screeched backward, spinning toward the open desert. Sarah's voice came through the radio, sharp. "You let him go." Elias gritted his teeth. "No, I'm letting him run." Because Mendez thought he was escaping. He didn't realize he was heading straight into the trap. Elias sprinted toward the nearest dirt bike. One of several left abandoned when the explosion sent the cartel into disarray. He swung a leg over, gunned the throttle, and shot forward, dirt spraying behind him. Rex leapt onto the back with practiced ease, his paws gripping the metal frame as if he had done this 100 times before. Ahead, Mendez's SUV tore across the open desert, its taillights bouncing wildly over the uneven terrain. Elias kept his grip steady, keeping just enough distance to avoid being spotted too soon. The chase wasn't about speed, it was about control. Sarah's voice crackled in his ear. "You better tell me you have a plan." Elias smirked, shifting gears. "I have a plan. Does it involve not dying? No guarantees." Sarah cursed under her breath. "Fine. I'll play clean up here. You handle Mendez." Elias revved the engine, closing the gap. The SUV was moving fast, but Mendez didn't know the land like Elias did. This desert had been his home for years. He knew every ridge, every dry creek bed, every hidden pit of soft sand that could swallow a vehicle whole. And right now, Mendez was heading straight for one. Elias reached into his vest and pulled a small remote detonator. Sarah had rigged explosives along key smuggling routes earlier in the week just in case. Now, they were about to pay off. He counted the seconds. The SUV barreled toward the trap. Almost there. Elias pressed the trigger. A controlled explosion ripped through the ground just ahead of Mendez's vehicle. The earth collapsed inward, creating a sudden drop-off where solid ground had been. The SUV's tires hit the edge, and for a split second, Elias could almost hear Mendez's panicked shout before the entire vehicle flipped forward, crashing nose first into the crater. The dust settled. The engine whined, sputtered, then died. Elias rolled to a stop, hopping off the bike with his gun already raised. Rex jumped down beside him, his growl low and steady. The driver's side door creaked open. A bloodied hand gripped the frame, then Mendez hauled himself out, staggering. His face was twisted with rage, one eye swollen from the impact. "You don't know what you're doing, Carter," Mendez spat. Elias stepped forward. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing." Mendez wiped the blood from his mouth, his breathing ragged. "You think this ends with me? You think stopping one deal makes a difference?" He laughed bitterly. "You're too late. The shipments are already moving. The people I work with, people way above your pay grade, they don't lose." Elias leveled his gun. "Neither do I." Mendez's eyes flicked toward the wrecked SUV. Elias saw it too late. A second later, Mendez lunged. Mendez moved fast, but Elias was faster. He sidestepped the attack, pivoting smoothly as Mendez's fist swung past his jaw. Before the cartel boss could regain balance, Elias drove an elbow into his ribs, feeling the crack of bone beneath the impact. Mendez stumbled, cursing, but he wasn't done yet. The man was a survivor, a predator used to clawing his way out of impossible situations. He lunged again, this time aiming for Elias's gun. The two men crashed to the ground, rolling over the dirt, fists and elbows striking in rapid succession. Mendez fought with desperation, but Elias fought with purpose. A sharp bark. Rex moved. The dog struck like a missile, slamming into Mendez's side and sending him sprawling. The momentary distraction was all Elias needed. He scrambled to his feet, kicking the cartel boss onto his back and planting a boot against his chest. Mendez coughed, blood staining his teeth. His defiance hadn't faded. "You think killing me changes anything?" he rasped. "Another man takes my place tomorrow." Elias cocked his head slightly, considering. Then he smirked. "Who said I was gonna kill you?" Mendez's eyes flickered with uncertainty. A moment later, headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as they approached. The roar of engines filled the air. Multiple vehicles. Reinforcements. But not Mendez's. Sarah's voice crackled through Elias's earpiece. "I told you I'd play cleanup." "You're welcome." Elias tightened his grip on Mendez's collar, yanking him to his feet just as the first vehicle skidded to a stop. Doors slammed open. Armed agents flooded the area, rifles raised, moving with the kind of discipline that only came from elite training. Not cartel. Government. A tall man stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Elias Carter. Elias didn't lower his weapon. You're late. The man barely reacted. We've been tracking this operation for months. You just accelerated the timeline. His gaze shifted to Mendez, who had gone quiet. We'll take it from here. Elias studied the agent carefully. You're not here to make this disappear. The man's jaw tightened. Not all of us are bought. That was good enough. Elias released Mendez, letting the agents haul him away. The cartel boss didn't struggle. He just smiled. The kind of smile that said this wasn't over. Maybe it wasn't. Elias turned, whistled for Rex, and without another word, started walking back toward his bike. Sarah fell into step beside him. So, what now? Elias exhaled. Now. We go home. She nodded, but they both knew it wasn't that simple. Not after tonight. Because wars like these never really ended. And Elias Carter had just started another one. The desert was supposed to be silent at this hour, but tonight, it was alive with movement. Elias crouched near a rocky outcrop, his fingers resting lightly on Rex's harness. In the distance, the private airstrip pulsed with artificial light, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The cartel wasn't done yet. Even with Mendez captured, his operation hadn't stopped. Someone else had taken command, and they were making their move. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. Confirmed visual on the plane. Cargo's being loaded now. We're out of time. Elias adjusted his grip on his rifle. How many guards? More than we'd like. Sarah exhaled. Security's doubled. These guys aren't just cartel foot soldiers. They've got professional contractors. Elias wasn't surprised. The people behind Mendez were powerful, and they weren't about to let their investment go up in flames. They needed that cargo in the air. He glanced at Rex. The dog's ears were up, his body coiled, waiting for the signal. Elias gave a short nod. We hit them fast. No time for a drawn-out fight. Sarah's voice was firm. Copy that. I'll take the fuel depot. You take the plane. Elias smirked. Let's make some noise. He moved like a ghost through the darkness, Rex at his side. The airstrip was a well-oiled machine, workers hauling crates, pilots prepping for takeoff, armed men patrolling in pairs. A few minutes more, and that plane would be gone. Not if Elias had anything to say about it. He reached the edge of the perimeter and waited. A guard strolled past, oblivious. In one fluid motion, Elias lunged, wrapping an arm around the man's throat. A quick twist. Silent. Efficient. He eased the body down, stripping the man's radio and earpiece. Static hummed. Then a voice. 5 minutes to wheels up. Elias scowled. Too fast. He slipped between the shipping containers, his pulse steady. The plane was massive, a modified military transport loaded with crates of stolen tech. He could see the pilots already in the cockpit, running final checks. He pressed his earpiece. Sarah, you in position, setting charges now. You? Elias raised his rifle, aiming at the first fuel truck. About to start a fire. The first shot ignited a small explosion, fuel spilling across the tarmac. The second shot turned it into an inferno. The airstrip erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, weapons drawn. The workers scattered. The pilot cursed into his radio, scrambling to get the plane moving before the fire reached them. Elias sprinted forward. This was it. No second chances. If that plane took off, they lost everything. And he wasn't about to let that happen. Elias moved fast, weaving through the chaos as bullets ripped through the night air. The fire from the fuel depot cast everything in a hellish glow, sending thick plumes of smoke billowing upward. The plane's engines roared, the turbines spooling up for takeoff. They were running out of time. Rex stayed close, his body low to the ground, ears pinned back as he tracked the shifting threats. Elias could hear the shouts of the guards, the rapid-fire Spanish mixing with military call-outs. These weren't just cartel enforcers. They were trained, disciplined, hired guns protecting something bigger than drugs or money. The radio on Elias's stolen earpiece crackled. We are wheels up into minutes, secure the perimeter. Not gonna happen. Elias raised his rifle, fired twice. The first shot hit a mercenary in the chest, dropping him instantly. The second struck a fuel line near the wing. Flames licked across the metal, creeping toward the aircraft. The pilot must have seen it, because the plane lurched forward, rolling faster, desperate to escape. Sarah's voice cut in through the static. Charges set. This place is about to go up. Elias pressed forward, dodging between crates as more guards closed in. He needed to stop that plane now. If it got airborne, they lost everything. He sprinted, pushing his body harder than he had in years. Every muscle burned, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Then, a new sound. Helicopter rotors. Elias skidded to a stop, eyes snapping toward the ridge beyond the airstrip. A black chopper swept in low, its searchlight cutting through the smoke. The reinforcements Mendez had promised. Only he wasn't here to see them. The radio crackled again. "This is Sierra 1. We have visual. Engaging hostiles." Elias cursed under his breath. This wasn't just an extraction. It was a cleanup operation. They weren't here to help the cartel, they were here to make sure no one walked away, including him. Sarah's voice came back. "Urgent, Elias. That chopper is packing serious firepower. We need to move." He exhaled sharply, mind racing. They had one play left. "Forget the fuel depot," he said. "Blow the runway. Now." A half-second pause. Then, "Copy that." Elias sprinted again, heart pounding. The plane was at full speed now, lifting slightly as it neared the end of the runway. The helicopter circled, its side door sliding open. A mounted gun swiveled toward him. Rex barked. Then the ground erupted. Sarah's charges detonated, sending a shockwave across the tarmac. The explosion tore through the asphalt, ripping a massive crater in the runway. The plane's front wheels hit the gap and everything went wrong. The aircraft buckled, metal shrieking as it nosedived, slamming into the ground. A fireball engulfed the wreckage, debris scattering across the airstrip. One problem down. Now, they just had to survive the gunship. The downed aircraft burned like a beacon in the night, but Elias had no time to admire the destruction. The helicopter circled back, its gunner locking onto them. A burst of automatic fire chewed through the ground where he had stood seconds before. Sarah's voice crackled in his earpiece. "We need to get the hell out of here." Elias didn't answer. He was already moving, sprinting toward the nearest cover as more bullets rained down. Rex stayed close, his instincts razor sharp, reading Elias's every move. The chopper banked left, adjusting its angle for another pass. They wouldn't get another chance. Elias skidded behind a stack of shipping containers, breathing hard. His mind worked fast. They had explosives left, but nothing powerful enough to take down a military-grade helicopter. The wreckage of the plane provided some cover, but not for long. They needed a plan. Then he saw it. A fuel truck, overturned near the hangar, leaking gasoline across the dirt. And it was just close enough. Elias pressed his earpiece. "Sarah, can you get to the tower?" "What? Why?" "Because we're bringing that bird down." A pause, then a sigh. "You better not get me killed." Elias smirked. "No promises." Sarah broke for the control tower, weaving between debris as gunfire chased her. The helicopter shifted focus, trying to track her movement. That was his opening. Elias grabbed a flare from his belt and ignited it. The bright red glow cut through the smoke. He took aim, arm steady despite the chaos. One throw, one shot. The flare arced through the air, spinning as it landed directly in the spreading pool of fuel. For a second, nothing happened. Then boom. The fuel ignited instantly, flames racing toward the truck. The explosion ripped through the airstrip, a wall of fire surging upward. The shockwave rocked the helicopter, sending it spinning off course. Sarah's voice cut through the comms. "Now or never, Elias." He didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle, tracking the chopper as it fought to stabilize. The pilot was good, but not good enough. The explosion had done its job. The tail rotor sputtered, coughing smoke. Then, a final shot Sarah, from the control tower. The bullet found its mark. The helicopter lurched violently, tail whipping sideways. The pilot lost control. It spun once, twice, then slammed into the ground, erupting in a massive fireball. Silence. Elias exhaled slowly. Rex let out a low growl, ears twitching as the last echoes of battle faded. Sarah's voice came through, breathless. "Tell me we're done." Elias glanced at the burning wreckage around them. "Yeah," he said. "We're done. For now." The fires still burned as Elias stood amidst the wreckage, the heat licking at his skin. The airstrip was a graveyard of twisted metal and scorched earth, the remnants of a battle that had ended in complete destruction. He listened not just with his ears, but with every trained instinct. No more gunfire. No more voices barking orders. Just the crackle of flames and the distant wail of sirens. Help was coming. Too late, as always. Sarah climbed down from the ruined control tower, her movements slow, deliberate. She was covered in dust and sweat, but she was alive. That was all that mattered. She met Elias's gaze and shook her head. That was insane. Elias smirked. You expected anything less. She exhaled sharply, scanning the devastation. We just tore a hole straight through a major arms deal. And you know what that means, right? Elias nodded. Someone bigger than Mendez is going to come looking for answers. Sarah crossed her arms. And when they do, Elias reached down, ruffling the fur on Rex's head. The dog leaned into the touch, his body finally relaxing after hours of tension. We'll be ready. Headlights appeared in the distance, multiple vehicles kicking up dust as they sped toward the airstrip. Not cartel. Not mercenaries. Government. Elias straightened, his fingers flexing slightly. But he didn't reach for his weapon. There was no point. This wasn't a fight he could win with bullets. The convoy came to a stop, and from the lead vehicle, the same agent from before stepped out. The man surveyed the destruction with a carefully neutral expression before turning to Elias. You have a habit of making my job difficult, Carter. Elias smirked. And you have a habit of showing up late. The agent didn't react. Mendez is in custody. We'll be digging through his operations for months, but this, he gestured toward the burning wreckage. This complicates things. Sarah scoffed. You're welcome, by the way. The agent ignored her. You exposed something bigger than a cartel deal tonight. There are people in high places who won't be happy about this. Elias tilted his head slightly. And you? The agent hesitated, then said, I'm not here to clean up their mess. I'm here to make sure justice is served. Elias studied him, reading between the lines. This man wasn't their enemy. Not yet. The agent sighed. Go home, Carter. Stay off the grid. Let us handle the rest. Elias chuckled. You and I both know that's not how this works. The agent held his gaze for a long moment, then gave the faintest of nods. Then watch your back. Elias already was. As the government teams moved in to secure the site, Elias turned toward the open desert, Rex at his side. It was time to disappear. For now, Elias drove in silence, the desert stretching endlessly around him. The road was empty, just the way he liked it. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind an exhaustion that ran deeper than muscle and bone. He had been in too many fights, seen too many battles. And yet, this one felt different. Rex lay curled in the passenger seat, his breathing steady. The dog had earned his rest. Elias reached over, running his fingers through the thick fur. Hell of a night, how? Rex's ear twitched, but he didn't lift his head. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. You still with me, old man? Elias smirked. Barely. Where you headed? He exhaled. Home. A pause. Then, you think this is really over? Elias glanced at the horizon, the first hints of dawn creeping over the mountains. It's never over. But for now, I'm done. Sarah sighed. Guess that's the best we can hope for. Elias didn't respond. He wasn't naive. Mendez was just a piece of the puzzle. The real players were still out there, watching, waiting. And one day, they'd come knocking. But that was a problem for another time. The truck rumbled down the dirt road, dust trailing behind. The ranch came into view quiet, and touched, like nothing had ever happened. Elias pulled up to the house, killed the engine, and stepped out. The cool morning air wrapped around him as he stretched, his body protesting. Rex hopped down beside him, sniffing the ground before trotting toward the porch like he had never left. Elias followed, feeling the weight of the night settle on his shoulders. He climbed the steps, opened the door, and stood there for a moment, listening to the stillness. Home. For the first time in years, he let himself believe it might actually last. Rex curled up by the fireplace, already drifting off. Elias sank into his chair, letting out a slow breath. His body ached, his mind buzzed, but deep down, something had shifted. Justice had been served. The right people were dead, and the wrong people were scared. That was enough. For now, he reached for the bottle of whiskey on the table, poured himself a drink, and raised it slightly. To the ones who fight, he murmured. Then he took a slow sip, closed his eyes, and let the quiet take over.